Hey guys, welcome to Gene Apologetics. This is of course your host, Gene. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And buy my book, The Misunderstood Bible, 2nd edition, now on Barnes & Noble. I think that one's taking a moment to prepare to ship. And on Amazon as well. And please forgive any background noise. There's an event going on in this building. So today I'm going to be looking at a guide to conclusive proofs for the principles of belief by Imam al-Juwayni. This is a typical Ash'ari book on metaphysics, aka ontology. Mine is translated by Dr. Paul E. Walker and reviewed by Dr. Muhammad S. Isa. So I'm going to just be looking at a few portions such as the attack of anthropomorphism and Salafism, and then his critique of Christianity. So I'm going to begin on page 19, section, a statement of what attributes God requires. It should be known that among his attributes there are those that pertain to his person in itself, and others that denote his qualities. So there are attributes that are for God's person, and by person he kind of means nature, and others that are his qualities. So the qualifying attributes are those in the spheres of governance belong to the subject, and are due to causative factors that arise from causes in the subject of attribution. So you have attributes of self, and attributes that are qualifying attributes. Now we understand. His critique is also the Mutazilites are the only ones who held a doctrine that the Maker is without existence. So he's not saying that God is beyond existence or the category of existence. He doesn't take that highly finely tuned, somewhat Neoplatonized view of Vladimir Lossky. So we're going to continue as well. I'm on page 21. The Creator, hallowed and exalted as he, subsists by himself. The subsisting one, that's one of the titles. Well beyond the need of a situation in which to locate or place in which to stand. So you'll notice that in Islamic theology, when they say God is beyond a place to stand, it's really just, it's beneath his majesty to geographically enter the world. That's why they have a problem with the incarnation. Why would God need to geographically enter the world? It's not about he physically can't. Like the rabbinics will say he can't. But the Muslims, the traditional Muslims of the Ash'ari persuasion will say it's beyond his existence not only to enter the world, but to take a form that requires some kind of a spatial existence. God, let's see, the leading master and expert Abu Ishaq, God be pleased with him, maintained that what subsists on its own is an existence that has no need for either substrate or determining agent. This condition, in his view, is exclusive to the exalted Creator. So again, he's beyond being a material Lord who sits on a seat, and we're also going to get into that in the next one. A subsection says one attribute of God is utter difference from the temporally produced. So that sounds quite a lot like Platonism. And so Plato had this idea that God is eternally juxtaposed to the created order. So how could he be eternally juxtaposed? Isn't the created order created? Well, Plato didn't believe that the created order was created. He believed that the order was eternal and that his God came and organized the eternal chaos that had already been existing. So matter already existed. It didn't have to come from nothing. Plato didn't believe in creation ex nihilo. And so Imam al-Juwayni is saying that God is in utter difference from the temporally produced. That's a Platonic and Neoplatonic term, that utterly beyond, just to give you guys an idea of what platform he's operating on here. I'm going to continue. He attacks the anthropomorphists here on page 24. Some of the anthropomorphists hold that the Creator, who is high indeed above their words, is spatially extended and particularized by the direction upward. So yes, the Salafis and others who hold to this kind of Aqidah will say that God is above. He sits on a throne, but we don't know what the throne is, but it's geographically above the earth. So he's within space. He's within some kind of time and space. Like, he's not above time and space. He's not beyond categories of existence. He's literally right there interacting with the created order in some limited capacity, but he does exist above the world. We'll continue. Each principle leads either to the measurement of God, so you got that Merkabah mysticism, or to dividing him into parts, both of which are plainly outright heresies. I wrote why. All right, even if he has a sensible point, why? If I'm a Salafi, why is it an outright heresy? Why is it wrong? Why can't I say that God is composed of parts? So he attacks this stuff, and he does use some metaphysics for it, but he doesn't justify why it's physically impossible for God to be in some kind of a geographic state, for him to have a constricted form. And that's one of the limitations, I think, of this text, his essays. He doesn't say why it's impossible. He just says it's heresy. So this is why it's dumb. This is why it's dishonorable. It's not befitting, and it requires too many complex excuses from the anthropomorphists. But I don't see why it's physically impossible. I see why it doesn't jive with his theology. I don't see why it's physically impossible. And then for some reason, there's this high contingency on the atoms. Atomic metaphysics have a very high place in Islamic ontology for some reason. It's not just like a little reference here and there. It's fully kind of, depending on the fact that atoms are real, which at this point, I don't understand how they could be 100% sure of that. I'll have to read more into that. We would inquire further, he says on page 28, if you qualify the exalted Lord as being spatially extended, even though everything spatially extended has volume and bodily mass, and bodily things are inconceivable in the absence of color, is there any reason to deny the possibility of color arising in the Lord's essence? Such consequences are inescapable, there's no way out. He's basically saying it's over. And I wrote begging the question. Because again, if I'm a Salafi, why couldn't I just say, yes, created things like this book and like this glasses here, they have space and they have color. There's nothing colorless. So, but couldn't I as a Salafi just say, but God, being God, can do whatever he wants, so he can have space without having color. So I'm not saying why it's physically impossible. He's come to the logical conclusion that you would have to defend this, but a Salafi could just cop out and say, no, God is all powerful, he can do whatever he wants, he doesn't have to have a color. So if I'm going to play Shaitan's advocate there, that's what I would say if I were Salafi. Then he goes on to the Christians. So I'm going to just review the Christian part, and that'll be kind of the end of it. The Christians teach that the Creator, hallowed and exalted is he beyond their claims, is a substance, and that he is the third of a trinity. So that's that Theodore Abu Qurra influence. And so he's getting that from the Melkites. I quote in my second to last chapter of my book called Ancient Trinities, the Muslim view of the various Christian schools. And so they'll say the Nestorians say Isa is the son of God. The Copts say Allah is the Messiah. And the Melkites say Allah is the third of three. That's because the Melkite theology, in their perspective, was essentially a high emphasis on the monarchy of the Father. So if the Father is God, then God is one of the three persons. So a third of three. Allah is the third of three. That is how they spoke. You can check out Dr. Bo Branson. He had a great talk with Jay Dyer and David Erhan on the subject that actually, yes, the Quran is correct in some ways to say, do not say Allah is the third of three. They're not misunderstanding the Trinity. They're copying the way Arabic-speaking Christians described the Melkite position. Allah is the third of three would not be out of bounds for the way that they spoke. And you can read their treatises on that subject. In his being a substance, they mean that he is the basis for the hypostasis. So again, he's saying in his being a substance, still talking about the Father is the essence, is how he's conflating it, and the Father is the reason for the other two persons. So Christians wouldn't say the Father is the essence, but they would say, yes, the Father is the unoriginate, the unbegotten, the uncaused, autotheos, who causes the other two persons. So again, this is all classical Melkite, so Melkite Chalcedonian theology. This is how they would have spoken. This is not, he gets details and word usage is a little incorrect, but this is not wrong to speak in this way. Further, they call existence the Father, knowledge the Word, and life the Holy Spirit. The word logos does not mean speech. Yeah, because the logos isn't speech, it's intellect. He gets that one correct as well. Thus, hypostases are, according to them, page 29, substance pure and simple, without anything added. I would say a concrete substance would be a better idea to describe that. Going down a little bit, he says, some insist that it means the word resides in the physical body of the Messiah in the same way an accident resides in the substrate. No, would that be Apollinarianism? The Byzantines hold the doctrine that the word amalgamates with the body of the Messiah and mixes it as thoroughly as might wine with milk. No, that's not true. The Melkites, the Byzantines, so Melkites and Byzantines are the same thing. Rum, in Arabic, the Romans, means the Eastern Romans. That's not what they said. They believe in two natures after the union, so they don't mix. That's Eutychianism. That's basically saying the divine and human mix into a third new substance. That's not correct, and the Melkites also didn't believe in one nature after the union, which is a composite. That's Oriental Orthodox Miaphysite theology. The Melkites believe two natures after the union. That's Chalcedonianism. The Nestorians also believe in two natures after the union, but they extend the differences so far that it becomes really two persons after the union. Differentiation between the Logos and the man Christ. And so he's kind of doing that same thing, or he will do that same thing later. Okay, likewise, if it is permitted to argue that existence is a hypostasis, what prevents considering perpetuity a hypostasis? And in accord with the preceding line of reasoning, such a consequence applies as well to hearing and seeing. He's also arguing, like, why aren't there unlimited persons? I would just say unsatisfied with revelation. The real historical Christian answer would just be because God revealed it. That's it. It's not about, well, 3 is more perfect than 2. That's really a highly philosophized answer that is not what the majority of the church held to, especially the Latin West. Then he goes, okay, the refutation of the Byzantines is essentially the same as a refutation of those who uphold incarnation. Well, all Christians uphold incarnation. I don't know what that distinction is. They would specify that once amalgamated, it bears the attributes solely of animate and inanimate bodies. Okay. Among other difficult considerations against them, we ask, how do you deny the claim of someone who maintains that the Logos was united with Moses? May the blessings of God be with him. This is a new heresy. Now we got Moses, the Logos, and for that reason, he could change the rod into a serpent and split the seas in 2 and do other miraculous things. I would say that's all via God's permission. That's kind of a weak argument. The Torah makes it clear that whenever a prophet does anything miraculous, it's God's permission. And the Son even says he comes in the name of the Father, but that he's distinct, he's special. The Gospel of John inescapably says he existed before the earth, before all things were made, that he's come down in the name of the Father. He bears the authority in the name and the representation of the Father. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father, etc. And the other Gospels say that he pre-existed his human body. You are not yet 50 years of age. How can you be older than Abraham? Before Abraham was, I am. And so all these verses state that Christ was clearly there way before he was ever born. Matthew 21:16. He quotes Psalm 8 verse 2 saying, the children can praise me because they praise Jehovah, my Father. So he's of some similarity at the very least with Jehovah, the Father Almighty. And so I don't think this really, any Christian who's saying, yeah, Christ is divine because he did a miracle, that's pretty weak. So he'd be right on that. Imam al-Juwayni would be right on that, but he wouldn't be right to say, therefore, he's not divine at all. That in which they believe, however, and on account of which their faith is corrupted, is what was done by Jesus, God bless him and protect him, such as curing the blind and the leper. Again, that's not on account of the faith being corrupted. Like, you could believe those things and say he's not divine, but you'd have to reject every single verse in the Gospel narratives that say he existed before. He came to the world, Epistle to the Hebrews, and much of Paul's writings, you'd have to just throw them all out. Again, this would all be just a difference between miraculousness as a proof for divinity, or rather what Christ is saying is a proof for divinity, and what the Gospel authors say. Nevertheless, the Christians are in agreement that the Messiah is a God. So again, he says, he's confusing this idea of theos and hotheos and etc., and just saying the Messiah is a God separate to the Father, but that's not what Christians say. Christians don't say the Messiah is a God separate to the Father. They say the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are one being, and they're 3 persons. So his position of Ashadism, his attributionist position, is that there's a distinction between the nature and the attribute. So why couldn't a Christian just say, you believe in a nature-attribute distinction, I believe in a nature-essence distinction, or a nature-person distinction? We're not so different, you and I. This is self-contradictory. To ascribe the name God denotes a judgment of divinity, whereas the Messiah is not purely divine. Well, again, though, all Christian would say, yes, he's 100% divine, 100% man, not half-half. So the agenitos in John 1:14, no Christian would ever say he gave up the divinity, lost it, it's gone, and now he's become a human, or he corrupted the divinity with humanity. No Christian would say that. Beyond that, they agree that the Messiah was crucified. When confronted, however, they insist that what was crucified was the humanity alone, and that the humanity in and of itself was not the Messiah. So essentially saying, who was crucified? The whole Christ, or just according to his humanity? So if you're Chalcedonian, obviously you say according to his humanity. Now, he does say earlier, all Christians agree on this, but that's not true. The Orientals would just say, no, Allah was on the cross. The Jews, the Pharisees, they crucified Allah. That's why the Jews preferred the Melchite position more. And there's some record of them celebrating the fact of Chalcedon and saying, see, the Melchite said we crucified a man, not a god. Whereas these Copts and these Syriac Jacobites, they say we crucified a god. So there would be a distinction there, but no Christian would ever say, Chalcedonian or otherwise, that because Christ died according to the humanity, that a separate person died, and therefore Christ didn't die, but the human Jesus died, and the divine Logos survived or something. No Christian would ever say that, so that's not proper to Chalcedonian theology. I don't think his critique really stands there. And again, it doesn't apply to the Orientals. So yeah, that's kind of it. I mean, the rest of the book is based on metaphysics. He goes into law, witchcraft, sorcery, a variety of other topics. So the main points of contention in summation would be, if you have an attribute essence distinction, why can't a Christian pull the same card and say, I have a person essence distinction as well? Number one. Number two, I think he confuses Melchites with Apollinarian heresy and Nestorianism in a couple instances. He gets a lot of other stuff correct, but the way in which he argues the divinity and humanity, saying they corrupt each other and don't exist anymore, or that it turns into a third nature, is Eutychianism. That's not held by any church today, whether Oriental, Eastern Orthodox, Catholic, etc. They don't hold to that. So that'd be my analysis of that. If there are Ashadis out there who disagree with my assessment, please let me know. Don't just spam the comments. I don't really reply to YouTube comments. So if you want to, we can discuss the time to dialogue. Again, read my book. I don't get into Ashadi metaphysics that much. And again, this is a metaphysical book. It's not a book really about scripture. It's not Sheikh Uthman quote mining somebody in a tent in San Diego. This is high ontology. And if you're familiar with classical theism, you could remove a lot of the references to the Quran and Arabic sayings in this book, and you might not be able to tell what religion we're talking about, because it's based on some of the same presuppositions as a Catholic, scholasticism, and later Platonism as well. So I would just say there's a lot of similarity between Rabbinism, Catholicism, and Islam in this time period and leading up to the Middle Ages of scholasticism, just simply because of the usage of the same Hellenistic presuppositions. So it's interesting to understand that and not to make it out as if we have these vastly different systems that can't even relate to one another. That wouldn't be true. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, share the video, and share your thoughts. Thank you for watching Jeem Apologetics.